Hello, everyone. My name is Camellia. I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, also known as a PMH NP. I'm also a nursing and mental health enthusiast. And I know I haven't done a video in a while, but thank you guys for hanging on and for engaging with me thus far on this channel. This channel was created to talk specifics about the PMH NP role, also mental health and mental wellness. And so today what I want to do is talk briefly about the next steps after graduation. And this may be a series. I may do multiple videos so that the videos aren't too long. But my goal here is to talk specifically about what the next steps are after you have graduated. You've met all requirements to graduate, and then secondly, you have taken your board certification exam. Now, much of this can be applicable to a nurse practitioner in general, but I want to specify here that most of what I'm talking about today will be particularly related to the PMH NP role. Okay, a lot of this, like I said, can be applied, but I also want to be very clear that many of the things that I will talk about, this is going to be a very high level overview of the things that you will find that you need to do despite where you're going to be working, despite the state that you're going to be working in. But there are some very specific things once you get into each of these steps that will be state specific. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the actual know-how for each step, but I am going to sort of talk about the actual steps that you will need to complete to continue and to be able to start as an NP and to start practicing in your state. Okay, so the first thing is if you are a PMH NP, the first thing to know is that when you apply for the exam, the board certification exam, you can only apply through one certification body, and that is the ANCC. Okay, that's the American Nurses Credentialing Center. That is the only certification body for the PMH NP role. Okay, when you're applying for that, you will also have to be in connection for most states with your state board to also show proof that you have an active RN license, and also that you have fulfilled all the requirements necessary for graduation. So you will have to obtain information from your school as well. Okay, so let's say you have graduated, you've taken the board exam, and you've passed. So maybe I'm meeting you here, but now you're wondering, like, what do I do next? What are the next steps? Some of you may or may not have landed a job, and but these things that I'm going to talk about won't be specific to that necessarily. There are some things that may give you hiccups based on your state. But the first thing I'll say is being in connection with your board of nursing. Okay, knowing what resources you have for the board of nursing, what your requirements are when you apply for licensure, and also things like fees. Are you required to have a collaborating physician on file? And also, what does your collaborating physician documentation look like? When do you need to renew your licensure? Here in North Carolina, we have to renew our APRN, Advanced Practice Registered Nurse license, once a year. Okay, and then we also have to have, in addition to practice hours, continuing education hours, and that is specific to each state. So the number of hours that you have to continue that will vary. Okay. The other thing, I'm also licensed as an RN in California and New York, and I will tell you, just from a basic RN standpoint, the criteria is much different. So you can always also expect that with an APRN license. I am in the process of pursuing an APRN license in those states, but I can tell you that you need to know the specifics for each state, because it varies pretty significantly from one state to the next. Okay. So you want to know how often you need to renew your license, what fees are involved. Usually that's roughly between $100 to $200. In other states, it's much more than that. But you also want to know what requirements you have to maintain your license, okay? The second thing that you're going to be doing is something called registering for an NPI. So NPI is a National Provider ID number that is going to be specific to you as a provider. All physicians have to have an NPI, PAs, nurse practitioners, and that is going to be a unique identification number for you, okay? That usually never changes. And you are going to get very familiar with what that number is because you're going to need it in so many different areas as you continue working as a nurse practitioner or as a PMHNP. I am going to drop in the bio here or the description section a few of these websites that may be helpful for you guys to go to that will guide you through these steps that I'm talking about. But for the NPI, there's a registry, there's a website that you can go to that I'll drop here. When you register for your first NPI number, you'll have to basically create an account. You'll also have to give general information. You'll have to have your practice location if you are aware of that at the time. Some providers put their a home address or a different address there, but just know that it's going to be important for you to go back in and edit that information because whatever address you put as your practice location will become public information. Okay, you're also going to have to know your put in a taxonomy, which is basically specific to you as an NP. Your specialty, which for a PMHNP, that's going to be mental health. Your license number and your state, your board, which state the state you're located in. Okay, there is no fee for registering for an NPI number, and the turnaround time for this is fairly quickly. You'll get it quickly. Usually within 24 hours, you'll have your NPI number. Okay. With the DEA, that's the next thing I want to talk about. Okay. I mentioned this in this way because this is the part that takes longer than expected, and many providers get sort of hung up on the DEA process, okay? This is where it also varies from state to state, so you do want to know specifically what the process is for applying for a DEA license in your state, okay? The Drug Enforcement Agency, there's a website for that I'll place here. This is going to be specific for you if you are prescribing controlled substances. In most states, in most settings, you are going to be prescribing controlled substances or have the ability to do that as a PMHNP. For example, prescribing benzodiazepines for anxiety or sleep, or if you're treating patients with ADHD, controlled substances such as psychostimulants. So you do want to have that number, a DEA number that will be specific to you. The application process is pretty lengthy for this, so do expect that. Also, the fee is pretty significant. It's about $731 now. Once you get assigned a DEA number, that is good for 3 years. Okay, so your state board will say how often you need to renew your license. You'll also have the NPI number, which stays with you forever. And then you have a DEA number that stays with you forever, but you do have to renew that once every 3 years. Okay. So you want to know that this is going to take a while. I've actually had providers say it takes up to 3 months for you to get your DEA license finalized and get everything that you need. There's a lot of this before that based on your state. So you want to know the order that you need to go in to obtain your DEA and then the other things that I've talked about. Okay. Most employers will allow you to start working without having your DEA. But again, there are going to be some limitations because you won't be able to prescribe controlled substances if you don't have that in place. Okay. I know this is sort of an overview, it's high level, and I didn't want to get into any specifics because it varies by state. But just to recap here, You want to get familiar with your board, what that looks like in terms of licensure, to both start practicing and also to maintain your licensure in your state. Again, if you're going to be in various states and plan to function in various states as a PMHNP, that would be specific to someone who is either traveling or if you're working telehealth. There are, many telehealth employers that require you to have multiple licensures. Know what that looks like for each state. Do get your MPI number started. That's going to be the shortest process. But then also with the DEA, know that you can get rolling with that, get started. That does take longer than everything else, and it will prohibit you from being able to prescribe fully for patients once you start working, if it's within that first 3 months. I'm going to land here because that is enough information. Hopefully this does mitigate some of the stress for you guys. It's not a process that I knew about. I did have an employer, my very first employer, and actually the HR department, who was specific to new providers, who helped me to navigate this process. But it's not something I would have known and expected in terms of the time, the cost, and really the order of steps for me to continue practicing or to start practicing. So I'm hopeful this is helpful. You guys comment below questions. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you in the next video.